Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Laylla, and today we have the fantabulous Amy Blackthorn back with us again. We are very, very excited. She has two amazing books that just came out.
Who writes two books at the same time, by the way?
Seriously, you're very much an overachiever. One of them, Social Media Spellbook, 366 Ways to Get Witchy on the Web. Sounds absolutely fabulous.
And I have questions.
And the second one that just came out, I believe on the 4th, is called Sacred Plant Magic, Spells, Rites, and Rituals for Living an Aromatic Life. So, busy person, how are you?
So busy. Oh my God.
Do you sleep, Amy? Do you sleep?
I really don't. Like 2 hours a night is the most I got.
I just want to point out to our listeners, not only have you put out two books at the same time, and I'm not saying anybody can do that because not everybody can do that, but other people have done it. But you are putting out two kick-ass quality books at the same time. That's different than just putting out two books at the same time. Like you're putting out kick-ass books. That's a lot. You're busy.
Super duper a lot. I am neurodivergent is amazing because I'm like, I need to procrastinate doing this thing because I don't want to do the thing until I have enough pressure to do the thing. So I'm going to procrastinate writing this book by writing this book. So I literally wrote them both at the same time.
Nice.
You're telling my secrets. So that's how I get things done. I'm like, well, I'll procrastinate this important thing by doing this other important thing. Yeah. That's the only way I get workshops written, man.
Seriously.
You're not wrong. Like, people need to know this is what we're doing.
These are the secrets behind the scenes.
Two hands, same time.
Now, not only have you just put out two kick-ass books, but we were just talking before we hit record about Temple Fest. You were just recently at a festival as the main presenter.
The headliner.
Keynote speaker.
Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Oh my God. It's so mind-blowing that authors that I've read since I was a teenager are saying, hey, how can I help you reach your goals for the next 5 years? How can I support you? How can you have something here. How can I nurture that? It is mind-blowing.
I might cry if that were me. If that were me, I'd probably just fall into tears and be like, who am I? Who the hell am I?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
At the beginning of your Sacred Plant Magic book, I was reading the long list of amazing authors that are recommending this book and talking about it. And you know, it reads like a who's who of the current magical world. And so that shows that you're really making a difference and that, you know, you've put something out there that is helping people, that's touching people and doing good magic, you know, and we need that in the world right now for sure. And one of the big things that I took away from reading Sacred Plant Magic, thank you for including cannabis. I very much appreciate you stepping out of the, you know, the box. Not a lot of, there are weed books out there, but not a lot of traditional herbalists are willing to touch that plant. And so I'm very glad that you spent several pages very methodically categorizing cannabis as a magical plant. Did you have any pushback on that? How did you feel about including that in your book?
I was really nervous about it. I wanted to do it, but I was so nervous that I was deadlocked for about 3 days. I couldn't write anything because I knew I wanted to include it, but I was worried how many people were going to be real mad.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Because it still has a stigma. Yeah.
I was worried about overseas sales. I was worried about here. I was worried about anybody getting mad at me. And I finally decided that this plant has been reaching out forever for people to have develop that relationship and work with this plant. So I'm like, you know what? It's my obligation is to the spirits. And so I have to include it.
Yes.
I kind of look at it as you would include marijuana into any herbal encyclopedia or magical tomb of sorts, just like you would rosemary or chamomile, just because different states or governments find it legal, illegal, whichever side of that coin you're on. It is still a plant.
Yes.
It is still a plant. You don't have to like it, you don't have to love it, but it's still part of that plant world, which is exactly what you encompass.
And it was important to me to make sure that there were ways for people who, especially here in the US, where there are states where it's still illegal, to develop a spirit relationship with that plant without ever touching the physical plant that could, land them in jail.
Absolutely.
I love that you mentioned the spirit of the plant because I am a huge advocate of the green goddess, of meeting the spirit of that particular plant. It's something you can do with all plants. But for me, for anyone that's taken any of my workshops, I very often say that cannabis made me an animist. It was growing that plant 30 some years ago that I truly could feel that relationship, that symbiotic spiritualness of this plant. And it literally made me an animist. I could see the personhood in all things, the spirit in all things, and it developed because of growing such a spiritual plant. And you talk about some ways to connect with plants in this book. One of the ways you say is you take 9 basil seeds because 9 is sacred and basil is sacred to the goddess. And you plant those seeds and talk to them. And this is not a fast process. This is a slow process. So can you tell us a little bit about creating relationships with the spirit of plant?
Absolutely. That specific spell is a spell for love. I volunteered for 12 years as a mediator, as someone as an expert with allexperts.com for 12 years. So you could volunteer in different areas. And so you could, the adult witchcraft section, you could volunteer in the teenage witchcraft section. So you could get questions from all over at any time, day or night. You're checking your email. And I got a lot of questions from people who said, I want a love spell. And I'm like, okay, here you go. Here's this thing. And a lot of my diehard friends and fans would say, oh my God, it's a love spell. You're taking someone's free will. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I told them to gather 9 basil seeds, to gather soil in a clay pot and some water, and to plant these 9 basil seeds because basil is sacred to Aphrodite. So what you're doing is you're growing and you're talking, you're developing a relationship with basil in order to show that you're ready for a loving and committed relationship with whoever is the right person. You're not saying, I want Johnny Joe to fall in love with me and marry me forever. No, we're saying that there is space in your life for another relationship, for another human being, for you to dedicate your time, space, and energy to.
And that's the kind of magic that we condone.
Absolutely. I want to make sure that people understand that this was a way to A, demonstrate how easy that connection is to build, but B, not just the understanding of who that plant is and who that person is that you're connecting with in yourself, but it's that if you don't have the time to plant the 9 basil seeds, if you don't have time to water, if you don't have time to tell that basil plant about your day, you don't have time to dedicate to another entire human being with thoughts and needs and feelings and desires.
Bingo.
That's beautiful.
Bingo.
And I think people want things that are quick. And so I
Yes.
liked that spell because it's not. It takes time to build these relationships in the real world and in the magical
There's,
world.
there's not a quick fix for everything in this lifetime, and that includes magically. Just because you're using, some sort of spiritual force or spiritual relationship to create magic doesn't mean that shit's instant. This isn't Mick magic.
No, absolutely not. So it was really important to demonstrate that these relationships are worth your time and energy and effort. I got so many people when botanical magic first came out said, I can't be a green witch. I kill all my plants. My love,
Chelle.
there's
You're speaking to one of them right there.
But on the flip coin of that, in my defense, I have also been a practicing herbalist for pushing 30 years
Even though she
because
kills plants.
there is a difference between that and the fact that I currently cannot even keep a spider plant alive. I'm desperately hanging on to it. The cat's eating it, Layla. Don't be mad at me.
Are they both dead? Just
They're
tell
not
me.
dead. They're not dead. I'll send pictures after this. They're not dead.
proof of life.
They're not dead, but they're not well.
Okay. Oh, Chelle. Chelle,
cat,
Chelle,
the
Chelle.
cat has eaten them. There's mushrooms growing in it, and I don't know what the hell is going on here, people. But they're still green. They're still green. It's
It
not
looks like you
dead.
mowed it. It looks like you mowed the spider plant.
It was the cat. He was,
Okay.
yeah. I've tried spraying him. I've put them up on top of my dresser and like I'm trying.
Okay. All right. All right. We'll talk after the interview. So yes, so you can be an herbalist even if you can't keep plants alive. So tangent aside, you were saying that you had a lot of people that told you, I kill all my plants.
And I had to let them know, I had to remind them that there's nobody checking, there's no licensing bureau for green witches. There's nobody checking your ID at the door. Develop these relationships with plants that you already know, that you're already working with. Go into your spice cabinet and look at what's in there and see who's popping up. If you grab garlic with every meal, guess what? Garlic is reaching out to work with you.
Tell me more about this because Shell's in love with the chapter on herbal
Divination.
divination that you put
Yeah.
in there. And this sounds very suspiciously like that. So
Yeah.
talk to
Absolutely.
me about your cooking or you're in your place and stuff's jumping
And
at
how
you. Tell
things could be quote unquote speaking to you or reaching out to you. Tell me more.
Absolutely. Yes. So when we look at the things that we encounter in our daily lives, people say, oh, well, I DoorDash every meal that I don't cook anything. That's fine. There are still plants that are actually reaching out for you. So if
But are
you
you
are
always door dashing Indian food is the question.
exactly.
Mm.
So if you want cumin with every meal, guess what? Your body is telling you that this is something that you need. Your spirit is telling you that this is something you need. If you are reaching for garlic with every one, it's a lot like the a lot of the magical perfumes we talked about with botanical magic. When we are reaching for a specific perfume or we're reaching for a specific essential oil, it's telling us something is happening in our body because it smells so good that we want it over and over and over and over again. If you keep
Right.
reaching for a frankincense and clove perfume, you might need a spiritual connection to someone outside yourself. You might be looking for that spiritual connection. So the things that our body is telling us we need are things that we need not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise.
It's really just listening better. And it's listening to the plants and the herbs and things along those lines. It's
And your
more,
body too, it sounds
yeah.
like. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have the innate understanding of our bodies when you say, oh, I could really go for some chocolate, and you realize, okay, my magnesium's a little low. I might need a little bit more of that. Chocolate is an herb. But it's more about not just the plants that we are thinking about, but the things that our body is telling us that we desperately want and need. The next portion of that is the ones that are popping up when you don't expect them to. So if I go out into my front yard and find lobelia inflata in the front garden bed, I definitely didn't put that there. It put itself there. Okay, well, it's really close to my front yard. What's the message that lobelia is giving me? It's trying to bring air, okay, to the front door. What do I need to get rid of? What is needs to be expelled out of my home, out of my spirit or my space? Okay, that's a great one.
You said something about, if you notice something different in your space. Now, talk to me a minute about plants of place. What do you suggest people do to get familiar with their quote unquote plants of place?
Look around you is the very first thing. These plants are reaching out for us to make a connection. So if that means that you're living in a city and you say, oh, there's absolutely no plants here, everything's dead. I just want to get from point A to point B. The hotel on the corner has a window box out front with little shrubs in it. You can find dandelions growing in the cracks of the sidewalk. These plants, especially those that really they're where they're not supposed to be, should definitely be a flag for you. If you say,
Especially if
I
they're catching your eye or something.
Right.
exactly. If you are having a difficult time, you say, I need to go for a walk, I need to clear my head. And you see three dandelions in a 5 block walk, maybe there's a message in the tenacity of dandelion growing up in the cracks of the sidewalk.
Especially if it's in the fall, because I have seen them, dandelions growing in the fall. They're a little bit out of
They don't
place.
grow in the fall.
Exactly.
So a little out of time, a little out of place. And so that can really be, like you said, a flag.
You can do the same thing from inside your home and inside your, we call it inner landscape. I've cleared my mind. I've said the intention that I want to meet the spirit of a plant that wants to work with me. And so I envision going through my mind through this inner landscape, and I'm going to go through a walk in the woods. I did this with Susan R's Rago like 15 years ago. The way that you know that your journey is a true journey and not a projection is the element of surprise. So if something pops out at you and it just really like, oh, I that didn't even occur to me at all. That surprised me. Definitely pay attention to that. I was walking through this wooded path that we had outlined in our uh, magical journey, and the outline of the path was actually had little wineberries running a little garden fencing of wineberries along the edges
Oh.
of the path. And I'm like, oh, I've never seen a forest path that was actually fenced in for me. That must be something to pay attention to.
Yeah.
I've talked before about going through my space once a month or so, full moon or new moon, depending on my schedule, and checking on the plants in the around the house. And so I left out the front door and I'm pouring my libations and I'm drumming and I'm singing and I'm doing all the full moon things to check in. And I get around the back side of the house and there's a stand of poke that has popped up between now and the last time I did this. And it's not just one plant, it's a whole little line of poke plants that are about chest height. So they've been there for a bit. Okay. Poke is poisonous. So if it can protect itself, it can protect me. But it's in the backyard. So what's behind me that I can't
Watch your
see
back.
that I need to protection from?
What do you need to watch your back for?
Exactly. So it turned out I had a stalker and he was a very, very dangerous person.
Oh, shit.
And I honestly believe that if Poke had not warned me, I would not be here today.
Oh, wow.
Definitely plant allies giving you signs, things to pay attention to.
Yeah, those of you who aren't familiar with poke, it is bright, like magenta, pink, purple, red. The berries are very, very purple. It screams poison, warning, red flags. So this was not subtle. This is not, oh hey,
No.
just in case. No, this was a great big billboard that screamed danger with pointing, flashing arrows.
I had a similar this isn't quite as dramatic, but just recently I'm still recovering from my first and very crappy bout with COVID. And I don't have a lot of herbal per se remedies on me, but lots of tea, lots of honey, lots of lemon. But just recently I found out my neighbor was going to be mowing a field that's right next to my house. And so I decided to go walk through it and just see what I could find as I'm walking through this field. And I discovered, all these brilliant blue cornflowers. I saw beautiful purple flowers. I had no idea what they were. And of course, the goldenrod that's everywhere. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a healing spell. I'm going to make a directional color wheel using these plants. They're all going to get mowed down tomorrow anyway. So I'm just going to pick these beautiful flowers and make a very pretty healing spell for myself in the woods. So I go out and I make a little circle and I quarter it with sticks and I start filling in the directions with different color plants that I discovered. And my lovely neighbor comes by and he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I saw you picking things. What are you picking?" And I showed him these beautiful purple flowers that I'd been picking. And he said, "Oh, that's bee balm. You're getting bee balm." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness. I could take this bee balm home. I can dry this. I can put it in my tea. This is fabulous for healing. It's a wonderful plant. It's got magical associations of vitality and healing and vibrant life." So without even realizing what I was picking, I was actually picking something that could help me. I have a ton of bee balm that I picked out of this field, but that just made me really happy to know that I was picking something accidentally that was very abundant in this field that I could take home and use to help me get over this terrible cold.
But I don't think that's an accident. I feel like that plant was saying, hey, this is something that you need. Your brain, your body, your spirit was saying, I need this. So you started picking it because whether it appealed to your eyes or your sense of touch,
Mhm.
something said, hey, this is exactly what I need, which is
Mhm.
how we come into the plant divination. There's a section in Sacred Plant Magic where we talk about divination, and the one that I really enjoyed was the idea of taking my bottles of essential oils and using them for sortilege, using them for drawing lots, just like you would runes or
I was
stones.
so intrigued by this in the book. I was like, essential oils for divination? Freaking genius.
Thank you. So when you look at it, you've taken three, four bottles at random and cast them onto your space. Well, what's closest to the center where you are? Where are they in relation to each other? What does that pattern look like? So if you have the very center of your working cloth is lime, what is that going to say about where you are right now? And if rose was the furthest thing from you on this cloth, how is that going to affect the reading? So keep in mind that as the intuitive person, as the person interpreting it, the most important interpretation of that is yours. Because if my guides gave me a message in French, my French is real bad. So I'm not going to get the correct message.
Right.
So I need my guides, spirits, whoever, to use the language that I'm currently speaking. So we're going to have to talk about lime in the current context of how I feel about lime and how I feel about rose. The idea of people putting their readings online to say, can you interpret this for me? I understand where it comes from because we were all new once. But the most important thing is how you view it because the message is for you.
Hmm.
You talked about new, and I wanted to kind of just touch on, you do have a lot of correspondences and magical definitions in the book. And I wanted to, I kind of look at you, me personally, I kind of look at you as like the modern day Scott Cunningham. And by that, I mean, back in 1991, when I picked up my first herb books and I got that Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, the thick green book,
Oh, yeah.
back then, and when he wrote that, and when I was that 18-year-old newbie, I latched on to his definitions, his meanings, his correspondences, his symbolism. I'm not 18 anymore, okay? And you have kind of modernized that. And Layla and I were talking about this before you came on, almost like the next generation of herbalists. And you've kind of given it a good, new, fresh look at symbolisms, meanings, correspondences, and not that old school male only perspective. I like how you've become the modern day Cunningham to me.
That is so kind. Thank you so much. Like, thank you.
Your books are very accessible and they're very interesting and they're very fun. I love reading your personal stories as you write these books. It makes it very easy to read, but they're so dense with information
But
as
they're
well.
perfect. But the thing is, they're perfect for new folks who haven't been exposed, but they're also equally perfect for seasoned people who want a fresh perspective or need an update, or I've never worked with that herb before. It really is good for a whole range of people, and that's why I'm dubbing you the new Cunningham.
So I'm writing the next book, and I was
Lord,
looking
woman,
for
do you breathe?
no, I really don't. But I was looking for a specific intention in the essential oils I was working with, and so I grabbed the nearest book that works with emotional aromatherapy. And so I was looking at this piece, and I go to the index, and I'm scrambling for the thing, and I pull up this recipe, and it just lists ABC, benzoin, patchouli, LME, anise. And I was struck by how much it leaves out of the story. Why these plants? Why did they do? Why did you pick them? So when we talk about Blackthorn sacred plant magic, every single thing that I put in there, I want you to have the reason why. I want you to learn why so you can do this yourself. If it's Blackthorn's botanical magic, if it's Blackthorn sacred plant magic, it doesn't matter. I want you to be able to take the inferences that I've given you. These are some of the key words and the reasons why, so you can figure this out for yourself. I don't want you to feel like I'm asking you to hold my hand for the next 30 years. I want to empower people to do this on their own because magic is agency. And if you're waiting for me to sit there and hold your hand and tell you it's okay to do this, like I'll stamp it in the book. I want you to know that it's okay for you to take control in your magical practice and do it for yourself.
You're guiding them. You're not telling them this is the hard and fast way it must be done.
Right.
You even say in the book that when you were researching some of these things for this book and for other books, you would often find conflicting information
Right.
depending on where it came from. And I think this gets back to when you were talking about the divination using the oils or using herbs. I love non-traditional divination methods because it makes you use your own correspondences. It
Right.
kind of forces you to say, okay, well, this oil means this particular magical thing, but when I smell it, I feel this way. And so I'm going to assign this particular meaning to it.
And the perfect example of that being so personalized is what might be off-putting to me might be the sweetest scent ever to you.
Right. Maybe I grew up making chocolate chip cookies with my grandmother. And so the smell of vanilla and sugar makes me happy. Maybe Chelle, you hated making cookies with your grandmother. And so the smell of vanilla and sugar is bad to you.
Right.
So that's going to have a different correspondence to you than it does to me, even
Right.
though some things are somewhat universal.
It forces personalization.
Yeah, it gives people agency. And in this book, you give I love that you have the lore, you have the folklore, and, that type of information, because that's important. These herbs have chemical makeup, they have medical uses, they have scientific grounding, and we know what they are. But they also have information that's been passed down for
The
generation to
spiritual side.
generation. Yeah, there's a spiritual side that goes deeper than just the science. So I love that you have the folklore and the well-rounded things in there. So people can kind of read that and make their own correspondences, make your own ideas about things with a basis in where it comes from.
Now,
Exactly.
I have a question for you, Amy.
Yes.
What's the last spell you did using herbs?
Oh, um, a dear friend of mine experienced a loss.
Mm.
Their sister died very,
Oh,
very suddenly with there was no warning.
oh,
Mm.
geez.
And so they are the older sibling,
Mhm.
and the loss of a younger sibling is unfathomable.
Yeah.
We expect that our parents will outlive us, but we don't expect our younger siblings
Right.
to predecease us. And so they were inconsolable, as
Understandably.
understandably as one would expect. And so they were so stricken that they could not move or think or breathe or eat or sleep or function at any level.
Grief
Yeah.
debilitated him literally, basically.
It really did. So I went to them and I said, I would love to help you. If I have your consent, I will develop something that will work for you personally. I want to make sure that this is something that is not just here, but that you'll reach for. I talk about the process in botanical magic because it's important that the person who is receiving this not find it orally magically nasally offensive, because then they won't reach for it. You'll have wasted your time, your energy, your spirit. It can't do the magic if you won't work with it. Like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going into here.
Back to that personalization. Yeah.
So I went to them and I said, hey, is there anything that really bothers you, that you don't like, that you won't use, that you're allergic to? I wanted to make sure I get the boundaries of the levels. And so I took a nasal cannula and I made an essential oil grief support blend for them that I put into a nasal inhaler so they could take it and have it in their office, in their car, whenever they had the need of that support. And so it was 10 drops of frankincense, 20 drops of lemon balm for that help express the grief that lives in your body. That lemon balm is so good for that. 5 drops of cypress, again, to help with processing through the grief that comes in waves. It will help ground some of that, and Mei Chang to uplift. So 5 drops of cypress and 5 drops of Mei Chang. And they carried that nasal cannula around for about the first month that they were really in depth with their grief. And it really helped them process and move to a place where it was bite-sized chunks instead of a massive wave of grief.
Manageable.
Yeah, it was
Manageable.
exactly. So
I
I
love
asked
that.
every one of the spirits of these plants, are you willing to work with this friend for this purpose? They said yes. So even if they accepted it as a gift and were like, oh, not really my thing, I'll just tuck it in my pocket and I won't tell Amy, I don't want to hurt her feelings. I would feel that that was a successful spell because each of those spirits said, yes, I want to lend my aid to this person. So even if they never smelled it, which they did, they really enjoyed it. Even if they never did, the spirits of those plants were stepping forward to help support that person in their time. So frankincense, cypress, and Mei Chang are all woody. So it really would give them the stability that they needed to move forward through that grief. They had parents and they had younger siblings to support, and I really wanted to make sure that they had the grounding and the stability of those heavy woods to make sure that they understood that it wasn't their magic to support alone. They didn't have to do it by themselves.
But we're still rooted in the ground.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that when you work with the spirit of plants that it turns into not just a spell, but more of a ritual?
Oh, absolutely. There's the timing and the depth and the amount of energy that's put into it. There's the actual energy of going through your book of shadows and saying, okay, this plant works for this and this plant works for that. But then there's the actual creation of, say, a talisman, raising the energy to empower that talisman. So there's something for those people to drive that spell later on.
Making
So
that connection.
it absolutely can turn into a full scale ritual. It all depends on how much time I have, how much material, what's needed, and what's really driving the need for that spell.
I
Nice.
like how you said you woke them up and how you asked them if they wanted to be part of this spell. You asked the oils because that I find is something in any spell. If you talk to your tools, particularly anything that used to be living, like herbs, but if you ask them if they want to be part of that, and ask them to lend their energy to that working, that can really add power, add oomph to your working. Is that something that you find to be true as well, Amy?
Absolutely. When we look at how we talk about our spell work as a community, there's one word that gets thrown around 99.9% of the time, and that's the word use. And as an animist, it is anathema to me to think about this as an inanimate object that has no agency and it has to be part of the spell because I said so. The word use, I try and strict it from my vocabulary because it's important to develop practices that acknowledge the agency not just of myself but of the spirits of plants that we're working with, the spirits of stones or crystals. Those spirits are lending themselves to this working, and I don't think that there's really anything that can be harmed by involving and invoking the agency of these other spirits as well as moving that energy forward. Just saying, oh, I'm going to use some lemon balm in this thing, it just feels super duper icky.
Yes, I am guilty of doing that. However, I'm not guilty of that when I talk about cannabis, when I talk about working with cannabis energy and with the goddess of that plant, with the spirit of that plant. And so I guess I'm trying to say that maybe I'll be a little more careful about that.
It's something we both need to be more cognizant of.
Yeah.
Some habits are hard to break, but they are worth breaking. So it's
Mhm.
definitely something to be cognizant of because I surely wouldn't say to someone, well, I'm going to go use Layla for a ritual. I would never dare say that. So you don't say, just that's the same vein of I'm going to go use basil for this.
A lot of people lately talk about how, hey, I saw this spell online and I tried it and nothing happened. And I think it's because you're just seeing the surface of a lot of these spells and rituals. You're
They're
not
just doing
actually
the
seeing,
steps.
yeah, you're not seeing the talking to the plant, the waking up of your tools, the adding your energy, the asking them to lend their energy and empowering that spell and empowering that working. And so I think that's where a lot of times when people say, "Hey, that spell didn't work for me," it's because they don't know those underlying
Components.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't have someone you can physically learn from, it's different when you say, oh, I read Sacred Plant Magic and I did the ritual and nothing happened, because those don't make for good TikToks. Those don't make for good sound bites. So when you see someone anointing a candle and praying over it, and it just looks like we're just handling
Doing the
material
steps.
objects. You
Right.
can't see the upwelling of energy coming through your feet and coalescing in the core of your being until it creeps out into your hands where you can empower it. You're driving that power into with the materials that you're including in your spell. So
Yes.
it's especially hard for newer people because they don't get that portion from the book that they're reading. They don't understand how to drive those spells through sheer force of will. You have
Right.
to learn to draw up that material from the earth and push it out into your hands.
And that's hard to teach.
And it's very hard to, grasp from a 10-second video online.
Right. Right. And I think that by being more mindful with your herbs, with whatever components of a spell that you have, if you're talking to them and asking their assistance, that's one step towards, pulling up that energy and awakening that energy in your spell components. So I loved that you talked about that. I thought that was really good. We didn't touch too much on your social media magic. Is there any social media magic tip from your book that you could share with our
So
listeners?
needed, by the way. Such a needed
So
book.
fun.
Such
Yes.
a needed book.
One of the keynotes that I did at Temple Fest was to talk about the connection that we need as far as social media is concerned. When we put something out into the universe, especially if it's magically charged, the number of eyes that land on it are going to offer a little bit more magic and a little bit more attention, a little bit more intention for the spell that you're working with. So it's not that you have to tell the world all your secrets, and boundaries are important, boundaries are healthy, and boundaries are safety. What we're doing is we're allowing the collection of this disparate energy that lurks out in the social media stratosphere to guide it to our intention. So even if you just have 250 characters in which to explain what a spell is and what spell can do for you, it's important to make sure that you are empowered to take the agency of that and make it your own. So if I say the spell for January 1st is to clean off your altar and empower it, to cleanse it, to give yourself a new space to work with for the next calendar year, you're not going to see someone taking the time to draw up that energy and to cleanse it magically. There, you'll see someone waving an incense stick around. The next step is the part that you cannot see with your eyes, and you have to feel it with your heart, with your gut, with your hands, with your skin. And that is the raising of energy. I want the hair on your arms to stand up. I want you to feel it leave your body like a blast of heat and go out into the universe for whatever empowering and beautiful magic that you're choosing to work for yourself or others. But you have to give yourself the opportunity to fail at something in order to really be good at it.
Absolutely.
Ooh, yes, yes. Oh, yeah, that's deep. I hate failing. Thank you. That is my least favorite thing, but that's a good one, especially part of my neurospiciness is I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. And
Mhm.
sometimes if I can't make it perfect, I won't do it at all. And so I need to give myself permission to fail at these things because that's part of the process and that can be very magical as well.
Absolutely. There's so much we learn from failing at doing something. That's why having a book of shadows is really important, even if it's difficult at times. Because if it doesn't work, we've got to figure out what we did wrong. And the only way you can do that is if you can go back and look at your notes and say, I thought the moon was in Virgo, but it really was actually void of course. So there's no magic getting to point B.
And that's why I think books of shadows are important. Not everything can be read in a book. It has to be written in a book.
It does.
Exactly.
Yes. So this
Shush,
means that
shush, shush.
Amy herself is saying you all need to journal. Ha!
Stop yourself, woman. Stop.
I am right. Everyone should be journaling.
I will never admit that you're right on that. Never. Never.
We were just talking about all the new journals she has started.
I've
So,
been fighting her on journaling for probably 20 years.
Fight no more. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to keep
I
track
right
of your
away?
magic. Yes, I love it.
I right away.
Before I let you go, I'm going to show you something. Speaking of writing journals, I have repurposed an old address book that has a bunch of Rumi poetry on it, which is just lovely, into my smokable herbs book, where I'm taking all my notes and everything about my herbs. And I stole one of your pictures from Sacred Space and I put it in my book.
Sacred smoke.
Yes.
So you are part of my little smokable herb, magical herb book. So I think everyone should do that. I think it's fabulous. So Amy said so, by the way. Amy said
And
so.
Sacred Smoke is a great place to start with that.
But thank you, Amy, for spending some of your precious time with us. You are so, so busy. Hopefully we will see you next year at Sacred Space again, and that will be lovely. So fingers crossed.
You definitely will.
And Amy, real quick, where can people find you? Where can they get you on the socials?
Social media, you can find me, Amy Blackthorn Author, on Facebook, on TikTok, and on Instagram. You can also check amyblackthorn.com for free downloads of all the first 30 pages or so of all of my books. I want you to know that my voice is the one you want in your head when you're talking about magic and magical ability, especially protection magic, because of the self-defense portion that is in chapter 6. I want to make sure that everyone gets home safely at the end of the night.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And Laylla will put links to all of those in the show notes as
I
well.
most definitely will. And where you can find her newest books and all the older books that are fabulous and books that you have even been, wasn't there a Hex book that you were part of?
Yeah, I did the foreword for Dorothy Morrison's Utterly Wicked.
Okay, there you go. See, so all sorts of books out there that you are part of. I love it. So we will put links to all of that in the show notes. But thank you so much, Amy, for being here with us. We love having you on.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you squeezing us in your calendar.
Yeah.
Of course. You're amazing and I love it here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for listening to Back on the Broomstick. We will see you next week on Friday for another episode. Stay wise, stay wicked.
And keep it witchy.